Good evening, San Diego School of Creative and Performing Arts. Good evening to our students, to our families, teachers, staff who are out there listening in this evening, and welcome guests that have RSVP'd and have received the link for tonight's program. Welcome to tonight's final Salon in our Salon series prior to the end of 2020. We'll be back up and running with a whole slew of slate of new guests that'll be joining us all next spring to have some invigorating and needful conversations surrounding the timeliness that we're living in the arts and what our future looks like in the arts as well. So tonight's guests are very special. They are from NYU. And I don't need to say much more than that because we know that as a public art school that many of our students are already looking at NYU. I've got fifth graders that show up and say, I'm going to NYU. So students, we know that we're real familiar with NYU, but one of the programs that students may not be as familiar with. And tonight is not so much a college and conservatory conversation as it's an idea conversation. What is the idea surrounding collaborative arts? What are the trends at the post-secondary level? What does this mean? And how is it impacting industry and vice versa? How is industry informing that post-secondary learning? And this is a program that's been 20 years in the making. And I want to introduce you all to the team here. We've got Sarah Rindak, Stephen Druckman, and the founder of the feast, Mary Battel. Everybody, welcome to our program this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much. It's really just such a pleasure and an honor to be here, Richard. Thank you.
We are excited because I think one of the things that we want to throw ourselves into is this notion of collaborative arts. I think right now, more than ever, and we talked about this at our ideation meeting just a little bit, but more than ever, we're seeing the emergence of all types of creativity that are happening in the moment that are not singular in discipline. Mm-hmm. Folks that are actually developing content and distribution of that content, production of that content by themselves. And that's a concept that I think that we need to connect some dots on in terms of understanding this bigger picture called the collaborative arts. And Mary, you've been at this for 20 years now at NYU. You've been developing this thing over a long period of time, and it's really starting to take off. Can you talk to folks a little bit about what collaborative arts means, how it was sort of developed at NYU, and how it's brought us sort of into this currency? What was that foresight that you had 20 years ago that you knew something like this was going to emerge?
Wow, that's just a great series of questions, and thank you. So let me start this off by saying Stephen and Sarah and I were all present about an hour ago at the collaborative workshop final presentations of the semester for our first year students. And it was a stunning example of what we are talking about this evening, about what you are introducing, Richard. It was first year students who were creating across disciplines. And this is after what, Stephen and Sarah, 2.5 months, 3 months of working together. And they came up with some stunning and beautifully articulated renderings for ideas that they have for art making. And it was just so exciting to watch. And we just all came back from that to have this conversation with you. And it was a really living and breathing example to me, standing there with these students. We're all wearing masks. Many people were on screen and some of us were in the room, and we were all making that work, which was also extraordinary and also kind of at the heart of the innovative way we're thinking about art making. This idea of, this pandemic isn't bringing us down, we're just going to keep making art, we're going to keep innovating to do it, is all in line with this kind of the whole ethos around collaborative art. So we saw it in action tonight. And what we saw was, 20 years, up to 20 years. And I should explain, Richard, for everybody else, that 20 years means that Open Arts as a program at Tisch has been around for 20 years. And that has been a place where students across NYU, no matter their field of study or their practice, their interest, they come to Open Arts to study the arts disciplines that are at Tisch, and they study those disciplines with people from other areas of interest and other ways of expressing themselves. So they come together in these open arts courses, multidisciplinary courses, and often interdisciplinary courses, because they're excited about this idea of creating across ideas, across levels of experience, across interests, across ideas. So for 20 years, we've been doing this at Tisch. And all along that time that I've been teaching in open arts, and Stephen, you've been teaching in open arts almost as long, and in other departments at Tisch, we've been seeing this drive, this energy, this excitement about what happens when you come into a room and you come from these different sets of experiences and you all want to create work. And there's an excitement about what you can create in that kind of an environment. So that has driven the development of this program for many years at Tisch. We've been watching students doing what we are formalizing in our program, in our BFA program. So the other piece of this is, as open arts was developing and we were kind of noticing these things about our students at NYU, I also coincidentally have been raising a son who's now 18, and I have spent a lot of time in New York City public schools, all the way from elementary up through high school, and I've also done a lot of work in schools around the country. And the thing I was seeing was the precursor of what we were getting at Tisch and in open arts. I was seeing 8-year-olds, 12-year-olds, 15-year-olds, 20-year-olds, all excited about breaking open the box of what it means to create work, of being young people who like to write plays, but they also like to make movies, or they love to write, but they also want to do animation. And it's tapping into that. It's tapping into that energy that comes from leaping into the unknown, trying something that excites you, bringing some areas of expertise, things that you feel really solid about, bringing that into the mix, and creating a whole new way of making art. So all of those experiences and all of those ways of drawing on young people's interests informed us. I've said, and I said, I think to you, Richard, when I met you in February in San Diego and your colleagues, I said, we are running to catch up. Our program and our school is running to catch up with the art makers of tomorrow. And so this program is 20 years in the making because we're catching up with what young people are telling us now is exciting to them.
Wow. Stephen, can you kind of add on to that? Because, in teaching in open arts, was it a synergistic? I'm imagining it was a synergy that you guys were beginning to see. And as leadership, the three of you kind of getting together and saying, we've got to make this more formal. We've got something going on here that can take another step. I mean, was that part of the process?
Yeah, I would say that really sort of nails the process exactly. Everyone has their favorite Oscar Wilde epigram, and the one I'm always so fond of quoting is, that Oscar Wilde said that if you know what you want to be, then you inevitably become it, and that is your punishment. But if you never quite know, then you can be anything. And that's kind of the ethos of our program. And I came out of teaching in the drama program at NYU, where presumably we attract people from around the country, from around the world, who know what they want to be. And they do just fine in that program. And then there are those who are open enough to realize at a certain point when they got there, maybe there's other things they can do rather than thinking about what they want to be. And they tend to thrive in that program really well because they have the wherewithal to sort of summon up that idea that people are what they do more than they actually are being things. I think there's a real wisdom in that, as Mary said, the typical, I don't know, typical, but you see it now more often in 18-year-olds than you did when I was an 18-year-old. This kind of intuitive sense that we are not nouns, we are verbs, right? I'm not a thing. I'm not an actor. I'm not a writer. I am a person who does things. I write, I act, and I don't really ever know what I'm going to do next. But if I am open to that, just sort of in a granular way, then there might be this kind of rich environment where I will thrive. And I think that's what we try to find and sustain and make a program out of, is this kind of rich environment that will allow people to not know what they're going to do next, but give them the courage, the skills, the vision, the ideas, the sort of negotiating talents of how to speak across disciplines and with other people, with other interests, and with other skills. We provide that kind of container. And as Mary said, when I left the drama department for open arts, it was partly because there was such a hunger for that. There was this need within NYU for that kind of environment. And that is what we have tried to form curricularly, is that kind of place where people can thrive and say, what's next? Because I do think that you can be somewhat imprisoned if you think of yourself as a noun and not as this verb, as something that is always in movement. And as a result, that's how I teach I'm a playwright, I suppose, if I had to write a bio, which I had to do for this very salon. But when I teach playwriting, I teach that you think of your characters as verbs, as always already in movement. And if you are always motile, if you're always in motion and you're sort of accruing all these different talents and ways of speaking, and you have an openness to different ideas, then collaborative arts is really the kind of perfect setting for that kind of way of making art, I think.
So you guys, over the years, obviously you saw that there was a need. I keep hearing over and over again. We saw the energy and we saw the need to further develop a program like this. Where are we seeing that industry-wise? Because I actually want to work backwards now just a little bit to come down a little bit more into programmatically what's going on with any collaborative art program, but particularly the one at NYU, because collaborative arts now is not a term that's isolated to NYU. I'm hearing that term at lots of other post-secondary schools that are beginning to develop similar programs. And so my question is, as you guys are in open arts and you're seeing this experimentation that is beginning to happen, or this curiosity that is happening with an actor, a filmmaker, a dancer, whoever it is, as they're exploring their discipline and they're thinking to themselves, I need more, I need other pieces to put this thing together. What is motivating these young people in terms of what they're seeing from an industry perspective that is allowing them or giving them that opportunity to say to themselves, this is what I want?
I would love to speak to that. So I'm thinking of some examples of former students, of alums who are now colleagues of mine. And just, that's one of the most magnificent things ever, to work with folks who are discovering multiple ways of thinking about making work, going out and doing it, and then coming back and talking about it with you. And that's just an extraordinary experience. But what's really interesting, this program, Open Arts, has been around for a while, obviously, and we've seen thousands and thousands and thousands of students come through and draw from the work they do there and take it out into the world to make work. So as you're right, Richard, the collaborative arts is a term that's being used a lot now. There are very few programs that are specifically designed in this way, but there is a lot of talk about collaboration and collaborative arts. But back to these students, because they're a really good example, I think, of how we are looking at this kind of work influencing industry and industry influencing this kind of work. So I'm thinking specifically about my friend Bryce Dallas Howard. And Bryce is, she's a producer and she's an actor, right? And she does a lot of different things. She creates a lot of work. She writes. She does a lot of wonderful stuff. She teaches at Tisch, and she teaches a course on devising work and producing your own work. And Bryce took courses across Tisch. And our two, I'm thinking of Anna Konkel and Maya Erskine, Penn 15, former students and now colleagues of mine, who took a series of open arts courses while they were in the drama department and brought all of those skills together to create the work they create out in LA right now, where where they wrote, they produced, they do some directing, they're creating their own work. What they have all said to me when I've talked about this new program is, geez, I wish there had been a consolidated BFA program to address what I did on my own, right? But they figured it out, and they're out working in the industry, and they're proving. The proof is in their pudding, right? They're creating work that it crosses disciplines. Now they are skilled. They're specifically skilled in certain areas, right? They have a lot of skill in acting, for example, but they also have learned how to utilize these multi and interdisciplinary skills in really interesting ways, and they are influencing industry. They are changing how young people are moving into the industry and creating work, where the assumption now, isn't so much, I'm going to be the vehicle, the actor vehicle for you to imprint your work on me, or they're coming into it with, no, now I'm putting on my actor hat, now I'm putting on my producer hat, now I'm putting on my writer hat. Right, and they're changing the way we think about how not only what kind of work comes out, but our ability to make work. That there's the world I grew up in, much like Stephen, I grew up in a world which was, no, I'm an actor. I go stand in line at Equity, and I wait for my agent to call, and I go to my audition, and then maybe somebody will hire me to be an actor, and then I will go, I'll do that again. And that's great. And I loved it, and I still love it. But there are ways that I am seeing artists now thinking into how they approach a project differently. That there's a shift in how artists are thinking about how they work, not for the industry, in the industry and with the industry. And in doing that, we are changing what the industry is. Fundamentally changing what the industry is. And then we can take it to even a more, I want to say, less commercial, though it's in many ways not. We're thinking about places like here in New York, like BAM, Brooklyn Academy of Music, or The Shed, so repositories of artists who are thinking about shifting the industry quite proactively. So there are now containers for creating the kind of work that my friend Bryce is doing, or Maya and Anna are doing. They're taking it in their own hands, and they're making the work that is changing the industry.
One of my students was Rachel Bloom. I don't know.
Yes, Rachel. Yeah, former student of mine as well. Yes.
You're a student as well. Yeah, and she came, when she first got there as a freshman, she was also my advisee. She was a musical theater actor. That's what she wanted to be. And then she took a writing course with me, and I love to take credit for all this, but of course it's not true at all. And And now, of course, she's probably best known for creating that television show. I can never, was it My Crazy Ex-Girlfriend? Is that the title?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's
And
it.
she's had an incredible experience with that. And then she got pregnant and started writing about that. Now she's written a book, and now
Yeah.
she's doing a book tour. And there's just this kind of unfettered freedom that I wish that I had had it, although I probably wasn't, imbued with the talents that a lot of my students have. But she changed television with that television show. And I'm sure she'll go on to change the book industry, and maybe she'll come back to musical theater and change musical theater too.
So what's interesting about what the examples we're giving and what you're saying, Stephen, is I think of all these folks who we saw come through, and they were so young, right? And not, but thinking about the leap of faith, right? And I say to our students in the BFA, I say to all the students, my students in open arts, but I say particularly to the BFA students that it takes a tremendous amount of courage to know that you want to break open the box, and that not only do you want to break open the box, but you are having a great time breaking open the box. You love to break open the box, and you want to just keep breaking open more boxes. But that takes a leap of faith and a certain amount of courage. And once, as an artist, you tap into that, it's an exhilarating experience because you have a sense that you are changing the industry. And the more you do that, the more you start to connect to other people who are doing the same thing. And then it starts to become a norm, right? Then it starts to become this accepted way of making work. And I really do believe that it is the people like we shared, the examples of people we shared, and our BFA students and students, Richard, in your program, who are going to be the next wave of this. They're going to be the next wave of this way of making work, which will make it a more of a norm in practice and business. It's already shifting. We're already shifting. 5-10 years ago, or when Maya and Anna were coming out of Tisch, or when Bryce was, or Rachel, or any Shanna Taub, or any number of people coming through there, when they were coming through, they were anomalies. They were on the kind of cutting edge, right? And we've seen such a shift in the way people think about approaching what we call the industry. And like I said, breaking open the box and taking that leap of faith and saying, industry, I don't know, let's shake it up. What is the industry? Here's the industry, right? And showing us what the industry is. And that's what's different. Young artists who are multi and interdisciplinary and collaborative in nature are redefining what the industry is, and they are telling us what the industry is. And that is the most exciting thing about this.
I find that fascinating. And so I'm going to extend this out just a little bit here because I think that there's some dots that I still want to connect for people who are listening. Mm-hmm. When I think of collaborative arts and I listen to the examples that you've given me, people have been doing this in the industry for decades already. They didn't necessarily set out to do that per se, or maybe they did, but I start thinking about people like Kenneth Branagh. Right, Kenneth Branagh is at the RSC. He's a stage actor. Blah blah blah. All of a sudden, he gets this idea that I actually want to make a film version of Henry V. I just need the money, but I'm going to direct it. Mm-hmm. Now, where did Ken get the skill set to be a director? And he says openly, I didn't study directing. I learned on the fly. Right? You think of artists like Michael Jackson or Prince, people who are just absolutely extraordinarily talented, and they come out and they are the producer, they are the writer, they are the creator, they are the choreographer, they're every single discipline. And I think sometimes when we start to look at that, we see those examples, and so many of those examples are of anomalies in some cases who never studied. They didn't put themselves into a place of study
Right.
to find what it was that they ultimately became in the industry. Beyonce, she's another example of producer, writer, choreographer. She does everything.
Yeah.
And yet kids want to be that. So they look at that, right? And then we're as educators looking at them going, okay, but the Beyonce, Michael, Kenneth Branagh thing may not be your journey, but how do we get you to that journey? Right?
Yeah.
How do we get you to that journey? And here's the other piece of that is, and how do we get you to that journey without dabbling? Because
Yeah.
it's one thing to dabble in a bunch of little artistic and creative endeavors.
Right.
It's another thing to take your work so seriously that you're combining these skill sets and bringing them to this place of constant synergy and movement
Right.
towards something relevant,
Right.
and something ultimately that you put out there for people to see. So I know that you're connecting those dots as I'm speaking, and those are the things that I really want to sort of tie together for anybody who's listening and going, I'm still not understanding.
Well, I want to turn this over to Stephen because I want you to answer this, speak to this too, Stephen. But my first response to this is, people like Kenneth Branagh or Bryce or Rachel or people we described, they have a specific skill set that they're very good at, and they had the space to explore other things to enhance that, which allowed them the capacity to build out and shift the industry. Okay, so that's one thing. So that's responding to you need to drill into and get specific and learn your crafts. You can tell the difference between a dabbler and someone who is digging in to some skill sets. So I think that there's a big difference there, right? And those examples we used were people who started with one thing and had the space and the means to explore other things, and they had the courage and the drive to do that, right? And they had to do it. I'm another example. I started out as an actor. I was an actor for years and years. And, and I ran, a girls program in East Harlem. And I learned how to do all sorts of different things that informed who I am today. And I had to figure that out, right? What I think is the difference, and I think what is important to and then I really do want to turn this over to you, Stephen. But what I think is important is building the container, a specific curricular container to address that the balancing act of exploration and expertise and craft.
Wow, love that.
Different. That is very different. That's why I say that is different than I'm an actor, but I want to kind of go and make some movies over here, right? I have some skill as an actor, but I need to understand how you make a movie. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to go and work with a really good documentary filmmaker who happens to teach at Tisch, right? Who is a working documentary filmmaker who is going to help me to understand the tools I need to use to make a really interesting piece of work that intersects my skills as an actor and my skills as a documentary filmmaker. And I need the curricular container to do that. And that's our job. That's what we have to do. We have to take it that next step from dilettante, dabbler, to a curricular trajectory that helps students build the skills so they go out the door and understand themselves to be breaking open the boxes.
Wow.
Stephen.
Now, I can't really top that. I mean, what I kept flashing to was the fact that I am now teaching playwriting in a world-class institution. I've never taken a playwriting class in my life. I never, ever took a playwriting class. I never thought I wanted to be a playwright. Before that, I was writing for the New York Times, and I never took a journalism class. But I seem to be full of epigrams today, but Mark Twain said education consists mainly in what we have unlearned. And I do think that part of the process of productive unlearning is what we try to, or what I try to do anyway in my class, I don't want to speak for anyone else, but I think that what Mary was talking about, providing the proper container so that you can unlearn these habitual things that just limit you to only allow you to see yourself in a certain way, while also encouraging these students to be very rigorous in terms of the craft that they do decide to pick up. Because just sort of releasing yourself from defining yourself as one thing, it doesn't mean you then just get to sort of on the divan in another discipline. You have
Right.
to really practice it and sort of learn the fundamentals of it.
Mhm.
But you're right. I mean, I guess, Beyonce and Ken Branagh and all these people didn't study what they ended up doing, but I'm sure that it comes from that sort of magical unlocking that is a process of education. That it consists in what they've sort of unlearned about themselves, which is, no, that's fear. I've got to hold myself back from doing that kind of thing. It's kind of wonderful that people like that can still thrive and flourish and never let schooling interfere with their actual education in doing these various artistic practices. We just have to provide the right container, the right atmosphere for that curricularly. And to me, it goes back to what I said before, this sort of ethos, this idea that we are verbs, we're always in process, we're always doing the next thing. And once you start seeing yourself as a noun, that's the beginning of starting to imprison yourself in a certain way.
The thing that occurs to me of what you're saying, Stephen, too, is that the container accelerates the process, right? I think of these really wonderful examples of very talented and exciting artists who work across disciplines, and the amount of time it took them to get there, and the amount of work involved in that. And everybody has their own, obviously, we're all in our boxes. We've all done this. We've all taken our different paths to get to the very multidisciplined practice that we all do, right? But and I was just a terrible bald pitch for a BFA program. A BFA program allows you to, but it's true. I speak from real sincerity. There's an acceleration of that process. I think for myself, wow, when I was 22 and 23 and standing up at Equity, what I wouldn't have given to have had 3 to 4 years of this container to accelerate my process to be able to self-produce. And there's something that's really important about that accelerant. The container that is rigorous, that is focused, that gets down and digs down into those crafts and those skills, and at the same time is saying, you have these skills where you're digging into, and we are pushing you to dig into these skills. And at the same time, here's the container. It's wide open for you now to experiment and play with those tools. And you have a limited amount of time to do that. And here it is. Take advantage of it right now and get in there and do it, so that when you get out the other side, you're that much further ahead than the folks. And one of our faculty members likes to say, is fond of saying, you're ahead of the person standing in line waiting for the audition and waiting for someone to hire them, because you've got the tools now. You've accelerated the process. You have the tools to get at the front of the line and make that happen. And right?
And the journeys to getting to where any young artist wants to get to don't have to be the same by any stretch of the imagination, right? I mean, you can come to NYU Tisch, or let's say the Juilliard School, and say, I want to be an actor and I want to be a classically trained actor. That's my goal. Mm-hmm. That's my focus. That's the outcome that I'm hoping to attain. You can be that. And I think where I'm fascinated by the conversation is that it's not about making every student suddenly multidisciplinary. It's about creating a pathway for the creative student who can't operate in a singular pathway.
Yeah,
It's
that's
just
cool.
not, it's just not who they are. So asking you guys this question too, I mean, do you, is every student capable of this, or are there certain, is there certain predispositions? Are there certain things that happen with a particular student that says this is the better journey for them as opposed to this over here?
Stephen, what do you think about that?
Well, I want to take the easy way out with this. The answer with this is that to say that we are a young program, so we have so far been pretty successful and haven't found any students who have lost their nerve along the way yet, or at least I can't think of any. But I'm sure that will happen because you know it does take some courage. There is something easier about saying, I'm going to be a triple threat on Broadway. I'm going to act, sing, and dance, and that's all I ever wanted to do and be. And as long as I stay in that silo, in that groove, then I'm assured a certain success, or at least a certain feeling of forward movement, of momentum towards some endpoint. And there's some risk and vulnerability in dedicating yourself to an artistic career, whatever that may end up being, and knowing you have certain talents and certain proclivities and things you want to develop, and staying in the room with other people who have certain talents and proclivities that aren't yours and maybe better than yours in certain directions. And hey, I'm going to learn from that, and maybe I'll end up, I can bet that the presentations that we saw tonight of the first semester of our students in their first year in the program, I can bet that none of them thought that back in September that this was what they were going to do as their
Right.
This was discovered along the way because they were given that. And who knows now how they're defining themselves tonight on December 8th or whatever.
Right.
And this will propel them in a certain trajectory, which may change again in a year.
So one of the other things that I think is really important I think is important as a teacher, as an administrator, as a parent, is to help every single student to figure out if this is the place for them. And we spend a lot of time, and Sarah, you can also speak to this, sort of administratively with the admin team, we spend a lot of time helping students helping them as faculty and administrators to understand for themselves if this is the place that is right for them. Because I think way back when the earth was cooling and I was 18 years old and I was going to school with the dinosaurs, and we were having conversations about, was this the right program for me or not? I wish I had someone to have that conversation or that set of conversations with me. So one of the most important things we can do is help people to understand their fit, help them to find their fit, and help them to be really solid and okay in their own bodies, their own psyches, their own beings about their choices. And to me, that is the most important job that at least that I have right now is to help students to understand that and to be able to talk about it and to be able to figure it out with our guidance. And if a student decides, oh, wow, well, maybe I am that person who wants to be the triple threat, then great, go be the triple threat, and I guess what I'm saying, Richard, is because it is all, we've talked about, process and evolving, and it really, truly is that, and has to be that. And it has to be that in how we live with and communicate with our students, and we help them to understand, what for them is going to be the best fit. And what I've been finding in those conversations, and Stephen, maybe you can speak to this with your own conversations, but what I'm finding is when we have those conversations, students are able to make the decisions they need to make for themselves in order to find their fit. And most often they want to stick with it and keep exploring this thing that is, bringing a lot of ideas and ways of making work together. So I don't think it's a done deal ever. I mean, look, I'm about to step into different ways of making work myself. And I'm about to step out onto some ledges creatively myself. And I'm looking for my colleagues to have those same conversations with me about what's your fit, what feels right, where do you need to go, where are you stopping yourself? And those are the conversations that we have with students to help them figure out how they need to move forward.
What you just said, I think, is so crucial because you know, Mary, that we're thinking about it at SCPA. We're thinking about how can we take a version of this collaborative arts and create it at SCPA in a way where we don't want students to suddenly feel like they have to, well, I've got to leave dance and try collaborative arts.
Right.
I've got to leave theater and acting and try collaborative arts. But more as a pathway for that student that says, yeah, I'm never going to be the ballet artist, but I love dance and I love acting. And I also see myself producing or directing. And I think I still need to try filmmaking because I think that's, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so at our place at the secondary level, making sure that what the conversations that we're going to begin to have and the questions that we want to ask of ourselves and ultimately that we want students to ask are those questions that are going to allow us to properly craft a container that has the right structure for the best possible outcome for a young creative, right?
Wow, welcome to our world, Richard.
And this is why we're having tonight's conversation. And
Does this sound familiar?
And I want to get Sarah involved because Sarah, I know from an administrative standpoint, are you usually the first line of communication with students when they come to the office? Are you the person that is speaking to them from the get-go?
Well, we do. We have a team of people. We have an academic advisor named Colleen, and we do host information sessions. So that's usually the way students find out about the program. And we talk all about what, Mary and Stephen are talking about in terms of the ethos and the pedagogy, but also about all the opportunities at NYU and at Tisch. So study abroad opportunities and how your liberal arts education is also combined with this, which is a huge part and a huge component of this program, is bringing in those humanities classes, even the science classes, in ways that you wouldn't necessarily think to, bringing in research, into your art making. So a lot of what we talk about is sort of all the opportunities, not only in the curriculum and the choice and the breadth, as Mary and Stephen were talking about, but also how that is, in the larger NYU community. Because it is a tough choice. NYU has over 250 programs I think you can choose from. And when you apply, you pick one. And so that's where this program is really essential to NYU, but also to Tisch, because it really does allow such a breadth of opportunity to cross and redefine even the disciplines that exist at Tisch. We do information sessions. We talk to students and any questions, about how the pathway is going to look for the 4 years, we will address. And I usually have conversations either one-on-one or in those larger info sessions.
That's awesome. So I would imagine too that you guys, when a student is approaching you and wants to have the conversation and you're unpacking things and you're trying to figure out the right fit for the kid. I'm wondering too if you've had to have some very difficult conversations with students to say, I'm not sure this is the right fit for you. Have you had to go down that road?
Sarah?
Yeah, no, I would just say the biggest thing, and Stephen and Mary sort of talked about it, is it's not necessarily the program for someone who knows I want to act and I want to direct. And those are the two things that I want to do. And I just want a pathway to be able to do more than one thing. This is really about experimenting across all the disciplines. So even though you come in with such a strong, maybe performative background, you're going to enter a technology class so that when you're finished, you're going to be very comfortable with animation and with, even making music, things that you might not have even imagined. And so it's about the open-mindedness and really not sort of already defining what it is, what pathway you might see from the very beginning, because part of the curriculum is about exploring. You really can't only do 2 disciplines. You could, of course, focus your trajectory and your thesis in maybe certain areas that are more appealing. But I think those are the hardest conversations. Is the sort of deep dive into 1 or 2 disciplines is really not the intention of the program. And so we really try to assess with students, how open they are to this idea of breadth and experimenting and redefining, and even looking in between disciplines, in ways they wouldn't have thought. And that's, I think, where we sort of steer if students are more looking for the triple threat, as Steve had mentioned, or being a filmmaker who also wants to learn how to write films. That's that may be a different program.
And I think part of it has to do too with sort of dissecting is if there's a I'm going to say a problem, but if there's an issue, if a student comes to me, and students have, where they're anxious about doing work that is outside what they consider their wheelhouse, and reminded, well, that's what this program is about, first of all, but let's talk about that, right? What is that discomfort? Is that discomfort is that a kind of a temporal? Is that like an immediate discomfort that it just doesn't feel good to not be good at animation because you're an actor? Okay, well, let's talk about that. Let's talk about what that feels like. That's different from, wow, I'm realizing that I'm not interested in doing animation. That it's not that I'm just uncomfortable with it. I'm realizing after a certain amount of time, this isn't my fit. And that's a very different conversation, because, we all have to manage. I'm going to do true confession time right now. We all have to manage just the discomfort of being out of our wheelhouse. And how do you understand how to move through that in a way that is going to help you learn something about yourself? And that's different from, wow, I really understand that I want to write and direct plays. And it's taken me being in this situation to realize that. To me, that is the greatest conversation to have with a student. That is wonderful, because that young person is making a decision that is based on a really deeply reflective process. And it's not just about, I don't like not being good at animation. And that's different. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. You're between the last 2 responses, between Sarah and you, Mary, in particular, you're really helping to more define a little bit more what the commitment has to be on the student. Mm-hmm. That there is a real commitment to the scope and sequence that is mapped out for a student who's going to think about the collaborative arts. Mm-hmm. And I think that's one of the dots that I really wanted to connect tonight for anybody that's listening about that collaborative process, because this is the conversation that you guys have begun at NYU is a conversation that is beginning to happen on campuses all across the country. Are programs developed yet? No, but many thoughts about what those programs might be are already in motion. There's lots of conversation about that. Mm-hmm. And I think that it's one of those things that that me as an educator and as an artist, I want to be careful about, because I don't want to throw ourselves into something that eventually becomes unsustainable, because it becomes all about dabbling. And it becomes sort of a backdoor way to become part of a creative process, when ultimately it's not serving you and it's not serving the program, right? You want to have a high level of integrity in terms of what it is that you're fashioning, mm-hmm. And what it is that you're creating, because you do want, ultimately, you want the Rachels of the world to exit the program and say, I have a real clear idea about what I'm going to make, mm-hmm. as I begin to take my journey, right?
And why am I going to make it? Why do I need to do this? And I think that's one of the big things that we push our students to think about. It's not only what are you making, but why are you making it? What are you trying to say? What do you not trying to say? Yes, what you're trying to say, but what do you need to say? And that was evident in these first semester projects. Is the young people in our first year were they're putting their their solid feet on the ground to say, this has meaning to me. This is important. This is what I'm saying, and this is how I need to say it and why I need to say it. And that to me is what helps to define rigor versus dabbling.
Right.
If we are asking our students to consciously reflect on, why do I need to do this? Why is it important for me to make this statement through these art forms in this way? That is different than, I'm just going to make this kind of goofy collaborative thing and everybody might enjoy it or not. There's a big difference, and you know, because dabbling is a bad word. As far as I'm
Right.
concerned, you know, it's like, you know, then you don't need to be in a program if you're going to dabble, right?
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. So we're coming to the end, and I'm really fascinated by the end of the first semester work. Without question, across the United States, this has been one of the most trying times in our lifetimes in public education and in education, period. Some schools have gotten around the distance by having a little bit of a hybrid connectivity, a little bit of a hybrid formula or approach. Some schools like ours haven't been able to return at all. We've been absolutely separated out.
So hard.
It is hard. But I also want to look at, this is going to sound crazy, but I want to look at the light at the end of that tunnel. I want to look at the potential for the rainbow after the storm. And I think that that you guys might just give me and our audience a little bit of that. Can you describe one or two of the presentations, the end of the semester presentations that you saw, where you saw innovation and creativity in a way that just made you as an educator just stop and go, man, we're doing the right thing?
Wow. Who wants to take, I mean, I have lots of examples, but who wants, I feel like I've been talking a lot here. So.
Well, you were in person seeing it live, so it might be easier for you to
tell
what stood out to you.
Yeah, that's okay. And then I'll ask you to sort of, both of you, because you were remote, right, in different parts of the Northeast. So that's the most amazing thing, Richard. You know, I was standing at 721 Broadway on the 4th floor in my mask with about, I don't know how many, like 8 or 10 of our 25 or so first-year students, and 2 of our faculty members, and our media specialist, and one of our graduate student workers, and the students had figured, and this is to me what is so extraordinarily kind of heartbreaking and beautiful about the semester, is that they worked across the semester to understand how to work together in this dual kind of reality. Some were in the room for class, some were on the campus but not in the room because they had to quarantine or the various reasons why they couldn't be on the floor, and some were in Mumbai and LA and Shanghai and everywhere else, and they were figuring out how to, and I'm saying communicate, and I mean that in a very broad way. They were figuring out how to communicate ideas and create work across these vast differences of time and space. So then we got to tonight, and they had figured out how to work together to present material. So this is kind of layers of, this is an answer to your question, it's kind of layers to the answer to your question. They figured out over the course of the semester how to understand each other's language to create work. And then they figured out how to create a moment to come together as a community to share that work, and how they were going to do that between the person live in the room and the person on the screen, and the work that they had to create, that they had to put together across time zones, right? So there was some live action performance work that was coupled with one of the people in the group narrating from the West Coast. And there were students from all over the world and all over the city and in the space writing responses to the cues. It was all about mental health issues, right? That was just, it was, and it was I mean, it just was heartbreakingly beautiful to stand there and watch them communicate this issue that is so resonant with so many of them in all these different ways. But they were, I will say, they were creating a language that is different from a language that I even understand. They were creating a language of art making that was different. There was, there was a lot of multimedia work, because that was a form that they could move to, that they could do from across these time zones, so that they could articulate an idea in so many different time zones and bring it together in a kind of multimedia format, was really extraordinarily beautiful and moving. And it was also, I will say to you all right now, it was incredibly moving to be in the space and to be there at the heart of our program, and to know that people were determined to zoom in and be there, and that there was just this moment, there was a kind of this extended moment of community that was just really beautiful, because it dealt with the reality of what we're living with. And so I look at that, and one of your questions was around innovation and innovating, and sort of broadly speaking, I thought tonight was a stunning example of resilience and innovation. And it was figuring out, and it got back to what I was talking about much earlier tonight, which is around this idea, the idea of an idea. It was working with an idea. It was students having an idea that is important to them, what they needed to articulate, and that was the focus. And then figuring out how are they going to articulate that across time zones and across mediums. I can't wait to see how we use the obstacles of COVID to create innovation post-COVID. I think we're going to see even more extraordinary work from what our students have, and your students have had to manage. The way they've come to make creative work in and around and surmounting this has been stunning. Stunning.
Yeah, I'm agreeing with you on what the moment is going to do in terms of how it informs the evolution in all areas of art. And Sarah, what was the experience? Because this is a different kind of shared experience, right? This isn't everybody in a room together where you've got the kinesthetic, you've got the chemistry, you've got that shared experience in a live setting, but you are a communal as a community. You are sharing this experience. What was that like from the virtual world?
Yeah, I mean, it was it felt like we were there, to be honest. The instructor and the students did a really good job with, they sort of had a camera and a mic following as if you were in the space. And the students worked really hard to partner with, whoever was on Zoom or whoever was virtual to really incorporate us. So as Mary mentioned, there were found objects in a room. And while we couldn't feel them, we got to contribute via chat about the objects, about our thoughts, about the prompt, and then someone else would write it on the table. And so they really thought about how the community was all experiencing the piece, and not just those in the room. So I think that was a huge part of, and they've had to do that all semester. So I think that was just, a part of what the final project was, is that we are a different kind of community right now, but everyone virtually and in the room, we're still all a part of it. And so I think they did a really good job with, I couldn't, squeeze the vase or the ball that I saw on camera, but I got a sense from it because someone else was doing it there. And then I could contribute, my thoughts if I wanted to. So we've really, these last 3 months, we've really gotten used to creating a different kind of community, but one that really feels connected, I would say. And that was seen tonight.
Oh, that's incredible. That's awesome. Stephen, we were just asking again, I was just asking the question, what was it like in the virtual world, experiencing the work?
The experience that stuck with me the most was that I have one student, I won't name him, but he also happens to be my mentee, someone I'm mentoring. And he came to me early on, and he was actually addressing what we were talking about earlier about I'm not good at this kind of thing, and I don't really like doing this kind of thing. There's a lot that I do like to do, but the things that he doesn't like to do tend to be physical, tend to be in his body, and he's really nervous about the dancing stuff. And yet tonight he wrote, I don't know if he wrote that music piece, but there was this moment where he did the most moving part of it was this gesture, this dancing thing where you saw that? It was so beautiful.
Yeah.
And part of it was sort of reinforced by the fact that he was gesturing in this Zoom box, where he's in his dorm room, where I happen to know where he is, and all those sorts of limitations, and seeing it was like this flower growing up out of the pavement of Brooklyn or something. There was just something really beautifully, plus the music itself was really gorgeous.
Right.
And so the fact that he sees himself as a musician and did this composition as his, the thing that he does, but actually the art, the discipline that moved me the most was his dance, and the dance sort of refracting in this cultural moment where we are all in our own little boxes. I found that incredibly moving, and it did speak to community and how we are really still reaching out and trying to touch one another, even just virtually, and even unbeknownst to ourselves. I don't know if he knew he was giving me that kind of experience. So it was really, that moment was really lovely for me.
That is awesome. It says so much about a program, about an institution, when you see educators like all three of you so emotionally connected, spiritually connected, as well as intellectually connected and curious about student growth. I mean, it just says so much. It's the way we feel at SCPA as well. We've gone over our 1 hour, but tonight's conversation, it was a long overdue conversation for us. And I hope that it sets the tone for many more conversations that will happen surrounding collaborative arts and the purpose and the meaning behind it, and the why. Why we need to do it, why we need to explore the multidisciplinary aspects of art making. And I just want to say, Mary, Sarah, Stephen, I look up to the three of you, respect you greatly and dearly. You are the vanguards who are carving the pathway and leading the charge. And I could not be more grateful for you to be sharing out with us this evening. We've got it recorded now, so I can't wait for others to see this broadcast so that they can hear a little bit more about the sophistication and the vision of what is evolving concerning collaborative arts. And I say evolving because, Mary, something that you had said earlier, and Stephen, I think you said it as well, you're continuing to discover.
Oh yeah.
And continuing to grow. So for everybody that's out there this evening, I hope that you've gained some incredible insight from this incredible dialogue and great conversation surrounding collaborative arts. And I think for me, what I'm filled up with right now is this moment of realizing, not for the first time, but for the 1,000th or millionth time, just how important what we do in the arts is, just in terms of humanity and connectivity and the human condition, right? Being able to relate, to feel, to care, empathy. I was talking to a dean the other day of an art school, and he said, I'm trying to get the curriculum people to understand that empathy needs to be one of our outcomes for student learning. And I just thought, wow. Well,
you're talking right up my alley. I've been doing a lot of research on empathy specifically to create a new course on it. So, and looking to Barack Obama, actually, in many ways, and his radical empathy. So I couldn't agree with you more.
So once again, Stephen, Sarah, Mary, Thank you guys for joining us this evening. I appreciate you all so much. Everybody, thanks for tuning in. And be sure to check us out in the archives at sdscpamainstage.com. You can go to the College and Conservatory page, or you can go to the Salon series page and scroll to the bottom and check out the archives of all of our past productions and programs. I want to send a huge shout out to our friends of SCPA who underwrite the Salon series. We could not do this without our friends of SCPA. So friends of SCPA, thank you all so much. We're not going to see you guys again in this format until 2021. But we look forward to seeing everybody once again. I want to thank one last time our guests from NYU, and I want to also wish you all a very happy and joyous, as much as you can, holiday season. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks. Take care.
Thank you so much.